Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. I hope you're doing well today. I started off today with a really good book that I reviewed just before this video. You probably saw that one and this one back to back. That other book was Horrors of the Black Ring, the old Series 2000 number 18. I loved this book, really good book. Then I decided I would take a break from GYG's final couple of books for the big ranking and rating and all that stuff of all that series to take some time to read some Series 2000. Today I picked out another book that I thought I would read. I don't remember hearing a lot of things about this particular book, but what I had heard seemed kind of on the negative side, and I couldn't really understand why. It looked cool, the cover looks cool, the title's a bit odd. And after reading this whole thing today, I'm 1000% with those who hate this one. This is awful. This is like right there with Return to Ghost Camp bad of the Goosebumps Series 2000 series of books. This one is number 20. Be afraid. Be very afraid. Look at that cool looking dragon. This is a Tim Jacobus cover that stands out quite a bit. I really like it. I love the design for the dragon too. Very cool. He's stomping on like a fence and stuff, which is part of the story. Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid is about 118 pages long. Goosebumps books, they always fly by. Very short reads. I cannot believe how bad this was. I mean, genuinely kind of insulting, especially for me, because I was kind of getting into the book for the most part. This is going to have to be a vague review. A lot of my negativity towards the book I can't really address, because it will be a massive spoiler section of the book that I can't tell you about. My reviews are typically spoiler-free unless I say otherwise in another video in the future or something, but for right now, this is one of those ones that I genuinely hate. I'm going to have to be vague about it as I talk about it, because I don't want to ruin it for you, in case you want to read this one, in case you haven't read it yet, and you plan on reading through the Series 2000 books and eventually want to get there. Anyway, so let's start with the actual story. I have never played like a Dungeons and Dragons type of card game. I've never been good at that, or like the really complicated board games that aren't something like Monopoly or, Clue, which is my personal favorite. I've never really done well with like card games. I love Go Fish, which is also referenced in here. But this whole book is kind of focused on like a Dungeons and Dragons medieval fantasy type of thing. That's kind of the focus and sometimes the setting of the story. Essentially, there's an old man nearby. Dr. I think it was Zarwood, or Mr. Zarwood, excuse me, not Doctor. Mr. Zarwood is a local neighbor who's just a rude old guy with a weird long mustache that sticks out real straight, and he's just kind of obnoxious. He accuses our main character kid, I think his name is Connor. There's quite a few characters in this book. He accuses Connor and his friend of stealing at his yard sale. And just out of spite, when they go to run away, they grab, or Connor at least grabs, a deck of cards for a card game type of thing, because their little group of friends, and another friend shows up as well. These three like to play board games, card games, a lot of Dungeons and Dragons types of stuff. And again, I don't really have any exposure to that. I don't know how similar the game is in this game that they play to something like Dungeons and Dragons or anything like that. But it seems resemblant enough that it feels like Goosebumps, Scholastic, whoever, Stein, was trying to cash in on the popularity of that, even though it was more of an 80s thing than a 90s thing, but it was still prominent in the 90s. Anyway, or 2000s, whenever this book came out. I assume this is post-2000 at this point. So, for me, I usually love Goosebumps Series 2000 because of how dark they are. I talked about that quite a lot in my review for the Horrors of the Black Ring review that I also posted today. Where that book was such an excellent read and super engaging, this book was engaging, but fell apart so poorly in the most insulting of ways, and I really mean that. It's kind of depressing how bad it got. The kids start playing the board game, or the card game that they stole, and they start to notice as they do things in the game. For example, if they lay down a card that has a lightning bolt on it, all of a sudden outside a lightning storm starts to happen. And then things get more severe when they come across things like, for example, hint hint, like a dragon as a card. And when these cards get, I guess, activated, if you want to call it that, they disappear. So the kids are trying to find out a way, as they play this game over a couple of days, on how to stop this insanity. Like, how do you even stop these attacks and stuff? When these things show up, they destroy the neighborhood. It's pretty bad in that sense. But again, at this point in the story, I was very engaged. I really was. And then something happened in the story kind of like what happened with Horrors of the Black Ring. At one point when you're reading Horrors of the Black Ring, something happens in the story itself to kind of redirect it. A lot of the first half of that 108-page long book aren't really focused on the Black Ring at all. It's really focused on a carnival and whatever. And the main character dealing with some sabotaging that's happening nearby. It's kind of a whodunit mystery. Nobody knows what's happening there. But in this book, it takes that experiment that Series 2000 sometimes has to it, that experimental nature that they sometimes went with, on how dark they could get, how different they could be compared to the classic series, compared to GYG. And they would try to do something else with it. And they do this like once or twice in the book. And it killed the pacing of the book. And it completely wasted like a good 40, 50 pages of this 118-page long book. It wasted like a good 40 or so pages of this book to try to do something that was like a Rian Johnson Star Wars Episode 8 Last Jedi, subverting your expectations type of move. And it's awful. It's one of the worst Goosebumps endings I've ever seen in my life. And it really pissed me off, because like I said, I was really invested in this. I was having a good time with the story. Very eerie. A nice atmosphere to it, too, most of the time. In that first little over halfway of the book, the first like 70 pages of the book, have a really good kind of setting to it. And I really enjoyed that. I was having a good time reading this. But when that whole, switcheroo situation happened in here, it ruined the book. It killed it. From that point on, the book just changed in such a bad way, and it just kept going further downhill in the most negative of ways. I know I'm being super vague. Like I said, if you haven't read the book, you don't understand how poor this book ends. I mean, you don't understand why a lot of people like myself that are so insulted by it. It's the fact that you were interested in the story. It's like if you watched a really good movie and then the ending was so bad that it ruined everything in there. Or one of those, not that that's the ending for this book, but I'm saying like if you had one of those kind of movies where all of a sudden at the end of the movie you find out the character's dead the whole time. That kind of ending for a lot of people ruins the movie experience. It kind of makes everything null and void and pointless. That makes people mad. This is a very similar type of ending, and I hate that about it. I think it ruins it. I think it's not a Jacob's Ladder, if you will. It's not a Silent Hill, if you will. It is genuinely frustrating with how bad this was. This again, just earlier, not even like 2 hours ago, I read a phenomenal book. I finished a phenomenal book that I started reading yesterday, The Horrors of the Black Ring, and this book pales in comparison to how good that one was. Again, this is like at the bottom 5 of my Series 2000 ranking. This is like down there with Return to Ghost Camp. This is not far away from that. And that was probably my most hated of Series 2000 because of how insulting that was to people like myself who are massive fans of the original classic series book, Ghost Camp. Anyway, with all that being said, what a frustrating read. I cannot wait to sit down and watch my friends' reviews on this book because of how bad this was. I can't be the only person who feels negatively towards this book. It feels like there's no resolution at all to this. It's so bad. And I can't even believe how Stein could get away with this, or Scholastic, or anybody. This feels like you paid for a book, like a half a book, really. And oddly enough, to have a series that has the Invasion of the Body Squeezers, Part 1 and Part 2, when you put those two books together, it's about a 250-page book. You would think they would have tried to have done that with this and actually resolve something, but it seemed to me like Stein, or whoever put this together as a book, it feels like Stein, so I think it's Stein. It feels like he didn't have an ending, and just kept going and kept going and kept going. This experimental nature to some Series 2000 books is kind of bad. Sometimes, not always. It's not in the extent that, like Slappy World, every single ending pretty much of Slappy World, except for 1 or 2 books, for me personally, are bad. It's not like as experimental as that, where it really kind of ruins itself all the time. Series 2000 has a lot of really good books in it. This is not one of those. This is a bad one, and I do not recommend it to anybody. Anyway, if I had to rate Goosebumps Series 2000, number 20, Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, on a 5-star basis, I'd give this a 2 out of 5. I was engaged, and I think that's what really makes it more insulting than anything. The fact that I wanted to see where this was going. I was curious. It's a book that I had loved the cover for a long time, and still do, and wanted to know where it was going to go, but I kind of had this feeling it wasn't going to be that good, just because of the general small things I had heard about this book over time. Anyway, 2 out of 5 stars for me. It might seem a little too low, but the fact that this book is what it is ridiculous, in my opinion. And as a consumer, I find it insulting. I feel like it's a slap in the face. Anyway, be afraid. Be very afraid. What did you guys think about this book? I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for your commentary. Let me know what you think. Are you as insulted as I am by this? Did you hate it as much as I did? It's sad because this is not a complete loss, but it's such a massive failure that I don't know what else to say about it. I hate that I had to be so vague during this review, but if you've read the book, you know why. You know why. If you've not read the book, don't. It's trash. Unless you're reading through Series 2000, I guess included, but be prepared because it's a stinker. Anyway, what did you guys think? Put your thoughts and comments down below. 2 out of 5 stars again. Thank you for watching once again. God bless you all. I will probably see you for another review tomorrow on Friday. I hope you have a great one today on Thursday. And God bless you. Goodbye.